Hi, welcome to part 7 on our exploration of Asian art. In this segment, we're going to be looking at another Buddha. We looked at the Bemayan Buddha in our last segment. So as you have learned, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of images of the Buddha, Shakyamuni, that exist in the world today. So remember, Shakyamuni is the historical Buddha. Some are big, some are small, some are made of precious materials like gold, while others are carved of stone, cast from bronze, molded from plastic, painted on silk, or printed on paper. What makes images of the Buddha Shakyamuni more sacred than another is its sorry, is its material, composition, its age, its owner. It is all the above. Is it all the above, or is it something else? Who was the Buddha Shakyamuni? Buddhism was founded by one individual, Siddhartha Gautama, sometime in the 6th or 5th century BCE. This man, the historical Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, is also known as Shakyamuni. During the time of the Buddha, there was only one school of Buddhism, which is the one that the Buddha taught. However, over time, there came to be different sects of Buddhism. The Jiaowei Shakyamuni, or Jiaowei Rinpoche, Rinpoche means precious one in the Tibetan language, is a larger than life size image of the historical Buddha Shakyamuni, housed in the Okang Temple in Lhasa, Tibet. Today, the Jawa Shakyamuni can be seen seated against a very elaborate sort of gold and bejeweled throne. The image is made of gilt metal. The effect is an image of gold hue with this shocking blue hair. Jawa Shakyamuni is seated with his legs in the lotus position, or Padmasana. His left hand is in the mudra hand gesture of meditation, Daya Dhyana Mudra, the Dhyana Mudra, and his right hand is in the gesture of calling the earth to witness, or the Humasvara Mudra. Together, these postures signify the moment of the Buddha's enlightenment. He is shown wearing a thin monk's robe, which drapes over his body and covers his left shoulder. When dressed, which he is now, Jiaowei Shakyamuni is presented with magnificent a jeweled crown and robes. We're actually going to be watching a video of priests dressing him. The sculpture has undergone restoration and reconstruction over its history, the most recent of which took place after the Cultural Revolution. It is not known what the image may have originally looked like in the 7th century when it was made. However, early texts describe this sculpture as being depicted in a similarly enlightened state, seated in Padmasana with hands in the Humasvara Mudra. One of the main variations is described in an 11th century text titled The Vase-Shaped Pillar Testament, the early written description of the image, which states that a wrathful deity is seen protruding from the Buddha's neck. No such wrathful deity can be seen today on the sculpture. Similarly, the crown and robes that the sculpture is seen wearing today are much later additions. Nonetheless, the continued restoration and veneration of the Jiaowei Shakyamuni over the course of its 1,300-year history is a testament to its religious and cultural importance in Tibet. So the Jiaowei Shakyamuni is considered the most sacred and important Buddha image in Tibet because it is believed to have been carved by the earliest architect, Vishnukarma, in India during the lifetime of the Buddha Shakyamuni, 6th and 5th centuries BCE. Texts such as the 11th century vase-shaped pillar testament suggest that the Jiaowei Shakyamuni was sculpted from a life portrait of the Buddha. The purpose of the statue's carving was to act as the Buddha's proxy after his nirvana, or departure from the world. This is his final extinction. The religious significance and sacred power of the Jiaowei Shakyamuni therefore come from its actual likeness of the Buddha, as well as its having been carved by Vishnu Karma. Such claims of likeness and celestial origins are not unique in the Jiaowei Shakyamuni. The Emerald Buddha in Thailand and the Ser Yogi Buddha in Japan have almost identical origin stories. While texts regarding the sculpture's origins and history would like us to believe that the Jiaowei Shakyamuni is the most accurate and thereby the earliest portrait of the Buddha, the sculpture in its original form was likely made sometime during the early to middle 7th century CE. The invention of the Buddha image is an anthropomorphic human form, dates to after the turn of the first century CE, circa early 2nd century, with the advent of the Mahayana Buddhism during the Kushan dynasty, and that is the Buddha that you guys power sketched. The purported date of the Jiaowei Shakyamuni, of the Jiaowei Shakyamuni, the time of the Buddha, from the 6th through the 5th centuries BCE, is not consistent with the development of Buddha imagery and the history of Buddhist art, nor does the actual sculpture conform to stylistic conventions of early Buddha imagery. More convincingly, it is an early to middle 7th century date of production for the Jiaowei Shakyamuni. The earliest evidence for the sculpture dates to the 7th century when the Chinese princess Weixing Gongzhu is said to have brought it to Tibet as part of her marriage dowry to Emperor Songtsen Gampo in 641. This date also coincides with the foundation of Buddhism in Tibet. What this suggests is that while the Jiaowei Shakyamuni is not among the first images of Buddha, its importance is not diminished as its appearance in Tibet coincides with the foundation of Buddhism in the country. While Jiaowei Shakyamuni is not a sculpted from life portrait of the Buddha, nor is it the earliest image of the Buddha, it nonetheless holds cultural religious importance to those who worship the image as such. This is evidenced by the continued veneration, the dressing of the sculpture for special occasions, and feeding of it with the Buddha, feeding of it as it were the Buddha on earth. So what makes one of the images of Buddha Shakyamuni more sacred than another? In examining the Jiaowei Shakyamuni, it is the sculpture's purported direct lineage to the Buddha, as well as its belief that it is the most accurate portrait of the Buddha Shakyamuni. So, now we're going to move to Buddhism spreads to east and the southeast. We're going to again look at some more depictions of Buddha, but in a different geographical location. So this is an image of the Longmen Caves in Luoyang, China. Worship and power struggles, enlightenment and suicide. The 2,300 caves and niches filled with Buddhist art at Longmen in China has witnessed it all. The steep limestone cliffs extend for almost a mile and contained approximately 110,000 Buddha stone statues, 60 stupas, and 2,800 inscriptions carved on steles. Buddhism, born in India, was transmitted to China intermittently and haphazardly, starting as early as the 1st century CE. Buddhism brought to China new images, texts, ideas about life and death, and new opportunities to assert authority. The Longmen Cave Temple complex, located on both sides of the Yi River, south of the ancient capital of Luoyang, is an excellent site for understanding how rulers wielded this foreign religion to affirm assimilation and superiority. So most of the carvings at the Longmen site date between the end of the 5th century and the middle of the 8th century. The periods of Northern Wei, or Wei, 486 through 534 CE, through the early Tang dynasties, 618 through 907 CE. The northern Wei-most of the carvings at the Longmen site date between the end of the 5th century and the middle of the 8th century. The periods of the northern Wei, 486 through 534 CE, through the early Tang dynasties, 618 through 907. The northern Wei was the most enduring and powerful of the northern Chinese dynasties that ruled before the reunification of China under the Sui and Tang dynasties. The Wei dynasty was founded by Tuoba tribesmen, nomads from the frontiers of northern China, who were considered to be barbaric foreigners by the Han Chinese. Northern Wei Emperor Zhao Wen decided to move the capital south to Luoyang in 494 CE, a region considered the cradle of Chinese civilization. Many of the Tuoba elite opposed the move and disapproved of Zhao Wen's eager adoption of the Chinese culture. Even his own son disapproved and was forced to end his own life. At first, Emperor Zhao Wen and rich citizens focused on building the city's administrative and court quarters. Only later did they shift their energies and wealth into construction of monasteries and temples. With all the efforts expended on the city, the court barely managed to complete one cave temple at Longmen, Central Binyang Cave. The Central Binyang Cave was one of 3 caves started in 508 CE. It was commissioned by Emperor Yanwu in memory of his father. The other 2 caves, known as Northern and Southern Binyang, were never completed. Imagine being surrounded by a myriad of carvings painted in brilliant blue, red, ochre, and gold. Most of the paint is now gone. Across from the entry is the most significant devotional groupings, a pentad, which is 5 figures, which you can see in the image in front of you. The central Buddha seated on a lion throne is generally identified as Shakyamuni, the historical Buddha, although some scholars identify him as Maitreya, the Buddha of the future, based on the giving mudra, a hand gesture associated with Maitreya. He is assisted by 2 Bodhisattvas, I can't say that word, and 2 disciples, Ananda and Kasyapa. Bodhisattvas are enlightened beings who have put off entering paradise in order to help others attain enlightenment. The Buddha's monastic robe is rendered to appear as though tucked under him. Ripples of folds cascade over the front of his throne. These linear and abstract motifs are typical of the mature Northern Wei style. The flattened, elongated bodies of the Longmen Bodhisattvas are hidden, which you see to your right, are hidden under elaborately pleated and flaring skirts. The Bodhisattvas wear draping scarves, jewelry, and crowns with floral designs. Their gentle, smiling faces are rectangular and elongated. This is kind of a fuzzy slide, but this is a detail of a lotus ceiling of the central Binyang cave, and it's depicting the celestial deities. And low relief carvings cover the lateral walls, ceiling, and floor. We see finely chiseled halos on the back of some of the figures. The halo of the main Buddha extends up to merge with a lotus carving in the middle of the ceiling, where celestial deities appear to flutter down from the heavens with their scarves sort of trailing. So I think that's what they're referring to with this picture. In contrast, the Northern Way style seen on the Pintad, the sinuous and dynamic surface decoration displays Chinese style. The Northern Way craftsmen were able to marry two different aesthetics in one cave temple. So two relief carvings of imperial processions once flanked the doorways of the cave entrance. The emperor's procession is at the Metropolitan Museum, while the empress's procession is at the Nielsen-Atkins Museum. These reliefs most likely commemorate historical events according to records. The Empress Dowager visited the caves in 517 CE, while the emperor was present for the construction of the central Binyan cave in 523 CE. These reliefs are the most tangible evidence that the Northern Way craftsmen masterfully adopted the Chinese aesthetic. The style of the reliefs may be inspired by secular paintings, since the figures all appear very graceful and solemn. They are clad in Chinese court robes and look genuinely Chinese. We're going to move on to a different part of the caves. The Tang Dynasty from 618 to 907 CE is considered the age of international Buddhism. Many Chinese, Indian, Central Asian, and East Asian monks traveled throughout Asia. The centers of Buddhism in China were invigorated by these travels, and important developments in Buddhist thought and practice originated in China at this time. This imposing group of 9 monumental images carved into the hard gray limestone of Thingyan Temple at Longmen is a spectacular display of innovative style and iconography, sponsored by the Emperor Gaizong and his wife, the future Empress Wu. The high relief sculptures are widely spaced in a semicircle. The central Vairocana Buddha, which is more than 55 feet high, including its pedestal, is flanked on either side by Bodhisattvas, a heavenly king and a thunderbolt holder, which is referred to as a Vajrapani. Vairocana represents the primordial Buddha who generates and presides over all the Buddhas of the infinite universe that form Buddhist cosmology. The idea of the power of one supreme deity over all the others resonated in the vast Tang Empire, which was dominated by the emperor at its summit and supported by its subordinate officials. This monumental sculpture intentionally mirrored the political situation. The dignity and imposing presence of the Buddha and the sumptuous appearance of his attendant bodhisattvas is significant in this context. So here you can see the Buddha monks and bodhisattvas. They display kind of a new, softer and rounder modeling and serene facial expressions. In contrast, the heavenly guardians and the Vajrapani are more engaging and animated. Notice the realistic musculature of the heavenly guardians and the forceful pose of the Vajrapani. So we're going to talk a little bit about Tang Dynasty realism, whether fleshy or wizened, dignified, or lighthearted, is displayed in the Kanyan Cave Temple at Longmen. Here we see accurate portrayals of individuals. These temples were created from about 690 to 704 CE under the patronage of Empress Wu. In the images of Arhats, which were worthy monks who had advanced very far in their quest of enlightenment, we see they line the walls. The carvers sought to create intense realism. Although they are still mortal, arhats were capable of extraordinary deeds, both physical and spiritual. They can move at free will through space, can understand the thoughts in people's minds, and hear the voices of faraway speakers. 29 monks form a procession around the cave perimeter, linking the subject matter to the rising interest in Han Buddhism, which is a type of meditation school fostered at the court by the empress herself. These portraits record the lineage of the great patriarchs who transmitted the Buddhist doctrine. And so it's either Shan or Han Buddhism, which is spelled C-H-A-N. Foreign rule of the northern Wei, yearning for assimilation and control, made use of Buddhist images for authority and power. The Tang dynasty leaders thrived during China's golden age, asserting their sovereignty with the assistance of the Buddhist iconography. All right, so I'm gonna stop there. We're gonna travel back to India and look at some cave sculptures of related to Buddhism as well. We're going to be kind of jumping across different geographical locations. So stay tuned.